Yes, Del, I think we always get an American lady's voice over the top of the Zoom call, which makes me wonder if it's recording, but I think we're recording, mate. How are you doing? Welcome to the We'll Talk Live podcast, pal. Pleasure to have you on.
I thought you were just a ventriloquist. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, mate, you never know. That might be a, sideline I could do on OnlyFans if there's people into that. You never know, pal. But thanks for coming on, mate. Absolute legend amongst the Adidas community, and I wanted to get you on for a while. It's great that we, connected, and obviously I reached out to yourself and got you on. Both massive Spezial fans. We'll get onto that a bit later on. But firstly, as James English does, but I'm not Scottish, and I also don't have hair, I want to talk about your early years. Early years growing up in London and things like that.
No problem. Born in 1966 in Queen Charlotte's Hospital in Hammersmith, which was a maternity hospital then. I don't think it is now. And then, obviously, when I was born, we were living in Chiswick till I was about 18 months old. From Chiswick, we went to Brentford from about 18 months old till I was about 11, and then on to Hounslow. I mean, the reason we moved from Brentford to Hounslow, because my dad and his brothers, they worked over at Brentford Market. They were greengrocers, do all the greengrocery stuff and that. But Brentford Market moved to Hayes. So we moved to Hounslow. And my dad always said, because obviously Brentford Market shut, and that's all he knew. He only knew fruit and veg. He didn't know anything else, to be fair. He worked there all his life, really, from as far as I know anyway. But growing up in Brentford, obviously, my mum and dad didn't have me till quite late. So I think my mum was 47 and my dad was 49 when they had me. So I've got an older brother who's 85 and I've got two sisters. One's just turned 80 and the other one's 78 this year. So in all fairness, I think I should have been a wank. I'm not going to lie to you. Right. So there's 20 years difference between me and my youngest sister. So of course, growing up in Brentford, I'm not saying you're fighting every 5 minutes, but your mum picks you up from school and she's 47. She was older than some of the nans. Do you know what I mean? And my mum and dad were older than the nan and granddad. So obviously, I had a few scraps over that because people say, "Oh, your nan's getting you." Do you know what I mean? And I didn't like it because I didn't really know no different because I was only a kid. Because by the time I started junior school in Brentford in a school called St George's, my mum and dad were early 50s, like 52, 53, which is quite old. But obviously in the 60s, when I was born, from what I've been told by family members and that, my mum was at the age, obviously, where women go through their bits and pieces. So she never dreamed she was pregnant. And it turns out that she was on a diet and went to the doctors because she said she's hardly eating anything. But the less she eats, the more she puts on. It's because she was pregnant with me. But obviously, in those day and age, you couldn't really not do anything about it because it was I think she was about 3.5 months before she realised. So obviously you couldn't do a lot about it really, to be fair. So, but yeah, that was growing up in Brentford. Obviously, then we lived down a street in Brentford called Green Dragon Lane, which is probably about a mile, if that, from Brentford, probably not that, just under a mile. And then we lived in a nice little house actually down Green Dragon Lane, but apparently, as the story goes, they were going to knock it down. So they moved us onto the estate opposite called the Aberfield Estate. Fuck me, that was as rough as a badger's gooch, mate, over there. But I say growing up again over there, it wasn't too bad. All I did from when I got up in the morning, obviously went to school, as soon as you come in, just played football outside. But I was never any good at football for some bizarre reason. You think the amount I played, I'd be brilliant. I was shit. I was fit and I was fast. But my head just didn't want to do what my foot wanted it to, and vice versa. Do you know what I mean? But my sport is growing up, believe it or not, was swimming. I was a bit of a champion swimmer. I didn't learn to swim until I was about 8, and I was in all these galas all the time. I think I was swimming 6 or 7 times a week, squad swimming, and I was a member of 2 clubs, one in Brentford, one in Isleworth. and it was just constant swimming all the time. Do you know what I mean? You know, when you get out of swim baths, your hands are all wrinkly like a frog. That's how my hands were for like 5 years. Do you know what I mean? Because I was constantly in the water. But the other thing, I've digressed a bit, is obviously when I was born as well, they found out I was deaf. So, well, that's a lie. They didn't find out I was deaf. Basically, what happened was I'll be out playing when I was in the garden or whatever, when I was a youngster. My mum and dad just called me in and they thought I was ignoring them. I weren't. I couldn't hear them. So it turned out I spent half of my childhood, I reckon, for the first 10 years of my life in Charing Cross Hospital, at least once a month, or what it felt like forever, sitting in a booth with headphones on, putting epoxy marbles from one side to the other every time I heard a beep in my ears. Then they realised I was deaf in one ear and partially deaf in another. But because of the swimming, obviously your ears are always getting wet. So that was another battle. So because I used to do a lot of diving, I do high diving as well, believe it or not. Back in the day, there was two swimming hats. There's a pink one and a blue one. The pink one had a strap, the blue one didn't. But because I had bad ears, my mum had to put these earbuds in, and she had to put them literally in Vaseline first and push them in my ears. Because as soon as I got wet, the pain was unbelievable. But I was doing some survivor badge or something because I'd done quite well. And I was doing some survivor, like I'd done me bronze, silver, gold. I was doing advanced life saving. And I dived off something and my head went bang. I just felt it felt like my head was bleeding inside. But what it was, they reckon it unblocked whatever was blocking my ears. Don't ask me, I'm not a doctor. Now I got my hearing back. I'm still a little bit deaf. I mean, my missus says I'm deaf because I just ignore her. I'm not ignoring her, just because I can't hear her. Now, it's bizarre. If I'm in a room with one person, I'm probably struggling a bit. But if there's loads of people, it's bizarre. It is really bizarre. Do you know what I mean? It's like some people call it selective hearing, probably. But see, the other thing growing up at school, because of that, back in the 60s, well, not 60s, it would be early 70s at school, because they said I was deaf, I had to wear this deaf aid. And it weren't like them now that you couldn't see them. This was like a great big thing on the side of my head with a wire that went down to this big pack on a belt. I looked like something out of Star Trek. So, of course, you can imagine I'd a few scraps because my mum and dad were older than every other person's grandparents. And then I got this box on my belt so I couldn't hear. So,
I was going to say that.
It was it was a nightmare, do you know what I mean, to start with, but...
Yeah, I was just going to say, because of that, we're going to get on to another question, but then I thought, when you were speaking there about your parents being older, obviously the things that you've gone through in your life, obviously having operations and being in hospital and stuff, do you think that sort of like channeled you to sort of dress well in a sense? Because I openly take the piss out myself, right? Because so no other prick can do it to me. You know what I mean? That's what and basically that's the same with like the clothing as well. When you dress nice, or get people saying when you're out in Manchester, for example, which I get quite a bit, to be fair, which I quite like, to be honest. Or like your trainers, mate. I love all that stuff, me, because I only know a select few people in wheelchairs like me that sort of. A lot of people in my situation have been sort of beaten down by society and the barriers that put in the way, whereas I try and force my way through that, as hard as it is. Is that something you did with fashion? Because I know that's the case for me. But,
I don't know, really. I mean, to be fair, if I'm totally honest with you, I mean, I'll go off track and then I'll come back to it. Yeah, basically, growing up, I don't really remember how I dressed in when I was at junior school. We just dressed the same as everyone else. I never really thought about it. And then probably moving to Hounslow and that. And then, I mean, every kid on basically, we moved from Brentford to Hounslow. It was a brand new housing estate. So there was probably 40 boys on that estate, all brand new. And I moved to Hounslow 1 month before the 6 weeks holiday of the very last year, before I went into senior school. So not only did my parents not know what school to send me to, because they come from Brentford, not Hounslow, everyone had picked all their schools, and I think I went into my mum picked 3 schools, I went into the 4th one. That's basically how you know what I mean? That's it, because I was so late, they were trying to get me into a school and everywhere was full. But moving into Hounslow, obviously, it was all boys on that. There was the girls on the estate, but it was mainly boys. And then there was another estate adjacent to us, a little bit up the road by Hounslow Heath, and they seemed to have more girls than boys. But when we played out, there'd be 30, 40 of you over the park playing football, and then, you know, it's an old cliche, when the light comes on, you come home. And that's basically what it was like. But everyone really dressed the same back then. When I was about 11, 12, first moving to Hounslow, you wore army greens from the army surplus shop. I had Adidas Kick then, so I had Adidas, I'll say about that in a minute, but I had Adidas Kick and a black Harrington. That's what everybody wore. I weren't nothing special because everybody wore the same thing. But I had a pair of Adidas Kick, which I'll tell you about. But from the age of about 12 and a half, I started getting really heavily into ska music, and Madness had just come out, the Specials and that sort of thing, a Selector. So I was a skinhead. So, and near enough everybody I knew was on out of my sort of circle of friends. Everyone was a skinhead, and you were a skinhead probably till about, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years, or whatever it was, basically the last 6 weeks holiday before I left senior school, everyone seemed to grow their hair out, and it went into a wedge, and we all sort of like become casuals overnight. But bizarrely, the skinheads that I know went down the casual route, and the mods I know went down the new romantic route, if that makes sense, you know? So, which was quite bizarre. But getting back to how I got the Adidas Kick, basically, my sister she used to live in Chiswick, and then she moved to Felton. So on a Sunday, me and my mum used to get on a bus and go up to Felton. But sometimes it was quicker to get 2 buses than one, so we used to get off at Hounslow bus garage. Well, the side of that we used to get off, there was quite a famous sports shop in Hounslow, if you come from there, called World of Sport. And it was probably like any other shop anywhere else in the country, but that was sort of like the first one that I'd really properly seen. And I would have been about 10. So my sister moved when I was 10. So outside this sports shop, they had one of these bus stops. And back in the day, these bus shops, it had a shelter and it had all like bars. So you used to climb on the roof. And my mum was always telling me, get down, stop fucking about, you know what I mean? But there was this sports shop there. And in the window, they had tracksuits. To be honest with you, they had trophies for sports. I didn't even know those sports exist. And to this day, I don't know what those trophies were. They were just mad trophies, do you know what I mean? And they had like trainers. But then probably because the Kick was quite relatively new, they had them in the window, along with loads of other stuff. And they caught my eye because I didn't support Liverpool, but I liked Kevin Keegan. Do you know what I mean? So back in the 70s, Kevin Keegan was the footballer. For me, he was like the Beckham of the 90s. Do you know what I mean? And because he played for England and all the rest of it, and he scored a load of goals. And even though he wore Patrick, I believe, if I remember, all footballers only wore black and white boots back in the day. That's all they wore. They didn't wear any fancy coloured boots. It was black and white, whether it be Puma, Adidas, Patrick. It was just basically black and white trainers, football boots. So for me, these trainers in the window, to me, look like football boots. So I badgered my mum for ages to get them, and she said, you can get them on your birthday. So I got them on my 11th birthday, which would have been in the April, because it's my birthday next week. I'm 58 next week, so I'd have been 11. I'd have been 11. So then we moved to Hounslow in the July, right at the start of July, hence why I had the Adidas Kick. But for me, from the age of 13 probably to about 16, I was a skinhead. I didn't wear trainers. I wore brogues, tassels and DMs. That's all I wore. Do you know what I mean? And then I suppose, but everybody did. So I weren't nothing fancy. So everybody I knew, they either went to Wembley Market, Portobello Road, or Felton Market to get their Crombies, their tonic suits and all stuff like that. But back in those sort of days, it was a bit weird because you didn't really just go out and buy clothes like you did now. You'd wait until your birthday or Christmas and you'd ask for certain things.
I do because I'm tight with money. I don't like spending money.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Spend everyone else's.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, sorry to briefly interrupt there, mate, because that came into my head. It always seems like in certain eras that sporting figures kick off movements or, incentivize kids or teenagers or even adults to like wear a certain thing. I know that was obviously synonymous with casual culture in terms of Bjorn Borg and, the other fellow who just got sent to prison, Boris Becker, is it? They used to wear it at the time. How come sports seems to transcend with fashion, do you think?
Well, I think it's, to be fair, for me, I'd probably say it's sports and music, because obviously, as I say, when I was 13, 14, the only really music I had really was Top of the Pops. That's all you had. You didn't have nothing else. And then you used to have this shitty recorder, and you used to take probably not the top 40, but you'd take the ska music off the radio, and no one was allowed to talk, because you go, just as you're halfway through tape the song, your dad would come like, for fuck's sake, you have to start again. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that was it. You went round people's houses with your records, and you played records and taped one another's. And what we used to do, I'd buy one record and my mate would buy another, and we'd take one another's, that sort of thing. But I think, for me, the dressing as a skinhead was heavily influenced by ska. Well, two-tone music, like the Coventry scene, that was all over the TV. All right, Madness a Camden, but obviously your Selector, your Beat, and your Specials, the Body Snatchers, all that stuff, really. That's all that was really on Top of the Pops or on the radio back in the day. Do you know what I mean? And then you sort of like then other things start coming out. You get a little bit older. You start growing your hair out, and then before you know it, you see someone. To be fair, I don't think. Obviously, I know Boris Becker and John McEnroe wore Ticini and Fila, and obviously I do remember them in it. But I think it was more influenced at football. To be fair, seeing the older people at football, I mean, I support Brentford, as you know. I'd season ticket for donkey's years, but you got to think Brentford were in the 3rd division. They were shit. Right, and I did used to go away. We used to go away to any London clubs, but there weren't that many London clubs apart from your Leyton Orient. That's probably it. That was in the, if I remember, maybe Millwall. That was in the 3rd division back in the early 80s. You know what I mean? So when Brentford were away, you couldn't always afford to go away with them. So I used to go to a lot of QPR and a lot of Chelsea games, because that's where my mates supported. But then you sort of like get mixed up in other activities at football. Do you know what I mean? And if you're at a certain age, if you're my age, round about my age, and you're into music, fashion and football, the chances are you delved in a little bit of football. Do you know what I mean? Not everyone did, but the majority, even if you weren't heavily involved, you were there. Do you know what I mean? And I'm no top boy of anything, but I was there. Do you know what I mean? So, and I don't claim to be anything I ain't, because I ain't. But, and a few of my mates were quite heavily into the QPR scene and the Chelsea scene. Nice to be with them. Nice to think I'm going to get my head punched in one week, or I'm going to get stabbed, and I support Brentford. And who's going to believe me that I support Brentford? Do you know what I mean? So it was, but when you go to these QPR was in the 1st division. There was no Premiership. So Chelsea QPR was in the 1st division. So you saw the way they dressed and the way away supporters dressed. Now, there's always been this cliche of North and South. You will never get to the end of it. I know what I see at football, and no one dressed like us. But that could just be, that was the Pacific teams we were playing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But no one dressed like us. And, we used to get called girls because you had a flick haircut, or we called them wedges. And people say they weren't called casuals back in the day, but we called one another casuals. You go, this casual fella, or this casual. Do you know what I mean? So it's quite bizarre. And then they say, I've listened to other people's podcasts, and they've said that music wasn't heavily influenced by casuals. And I don't know. For me, we used to go shopping. If it wasn't football season, we'd go shopping and get your clothes any way you could, if you know what I mean. Right? We'll put it this way. My first job, I bought home £35 a week. I had to give my dad £10. It was the £10 for going out Friday night, £10 for going out Saturday night, and £5 to get me to work. Buyed all the clothes you could think of because you got them any way you could. Do you know what I mean? And there was always someone on the estate knocking something out or whatever. Do you know? But you'd go to football and then you'd go home and get changed, and you're going up to the pub and you'll be going clubbing, or you'll go out to a club and you'd be talking about the football match you'd been to that day. Or if it wasn't football season, you'd be up, all of us, we'd be up Kings Road or Oxford Street or Carnaby Street just getting clothes. Do you know what I mean? To wear out. So what I think clothes, football clothes and fashion, they do all go together. But I think what revived it was probably the Britpop scene, to be fair.
Yeah.
And it's not, how can I put it? It's everyone I know, it's not me, everyone I know, everyone I grew up with, and no different to me, we've all wore the same similar sort of clothes. I don't believe in fashion because I think if you follow fashion, it goes out of fashion, and then you look a div. I don't follow fashion. The way I see it, fashion comes and goes, style stays. Yeah.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Do you know what I mean? That's the way I see it. Now, everyone I know, the only thing that changed with us was probably the width of your jeans. So, you know, like they went a bit flary at times, or they come back in skinny and then they went back up flary. But the tops you wore, I'm not saying I was wearing feelers and that in 1990 because I wasn't. But I'd be wearing what I thought I was comfortable in then, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? But all of it's not to say it's not just me. Everyone I know, I could ring 10 mates up now from London and we'd go up the pub and we'd all be in similar clothes. There's no one that's totally different. Do you understand what I mean?
Do you reckon was an organic process or something, that the organic process that happened naturally, or something that was a conscious decision, the ever-evolving nature of the clothes that you guys wore?
I think it's one-upmanship, if I'm honest. Everyone wants the piece of clothing that no one else has got to a certain degree. And that still goes on now. Do you know what I mean? Same as the special range, isn't it? No one admits it. Everyone likes to get something. Do you know what I mean? You know, you can't get all the, no one can afford all the drop, but it's nice to get some bits. But as for, I suppose, what sort of kicked it back off was when I had what did I have? I had a Ticini tracksuit top, right? And Blur first started coming out. When did Blur come out? 2000 and I can't remember. But Oasis was out. I think. Beg your pardon?
Blur and Oasis was between 94 and 96.
I know Oasis was 94, but the way they dressed, see, because as well, I weren't really heavily into the acid scene. I liked certain bits of the music, but I weren't really into it because I was heavily into jazz funk. I was into ska music. Then when I became a casual, if that's what you want to call it, you started going clubbing. Well, the clubs didn't play ska music. They played jazz funk and soul and northern soul and that sort of thing. So that's what I started getting really heavily into. But then after that probably came, and even though it's sort of like morphed into house music, which I Chicago house in the late 80s, I wasn't really into hardcore, happy hardcore rave music, if I'm honest, because it was round about the time. I'm not saying I haven't been to a rave because that'd be a lie. I have been, but I weren't for going to a rave, popping pills every weekend. It weren't my thing. My ex-missus, we just had her first child, and then I've got 5 kids, mate. Do you know what I mean? So from the 90s was taken out, really. Do you know what I mean? So you couldn't really afford to do everything. But what us lot did, and that's, as I say, it weren't only me, it was all my little clique of mates sort of thing. None of us really went raving. We weren't into it. We were more into, a mate of mine was in a band, and they were called the Chiswick Flyovers, right? And they were really good. And we used to follow them all around London, and they were supporting people like the Counterfeit Stones, the Bootleg Beatles. So they were quite good for their time. Do you know what I mean? And then I started getting into Happy Mondays, getting into indie music, and they dressed like we did, or we dressed like they did, or however you want to look at it. Do you know what I mean? You all dressed that sort of look. Do you know what I mean? And I still think they do now, but there's not as many. I think in the early 2000s, there seems to be a lot more indie bands than there is now. You know, they come and gone. You know, the big ones have stayed, obviously, but they all similar. We all dress similar. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it seems to be like a mutual understanding. As I said earlier, and what I read in one of your articles, don't know about you, but I proper buzz off when someone compliments me on my clothes or knows about, oh, you've got a pair of the Trim Star Lost ones, or, you know, pair of the latest Ambo Pro Spezials, which are over there. Currently wearing the Adidas Kick because I found a pair from a mate, Stuart Mills, the other week. How is it that people just know about, have a sixth sense about other people's dress? I love it, me. I think it's class.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, I've said this to my missus, right? You could go into any city in England, right? And you could walk down the street. I could walk down the street in any city in England, and out you might pass 500 different men.
Yeah.
One of them will have something on that you get. You don't even talk to that person. They don't talk to you. But you know that he knows that you know, if that makes, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and especially with the Spezial stuff. You see, if I see anybody out in Spezial, I look. And they probably look at me. I'm not saying I live in Spezial because I'm into all sorts. I'm into, you know, I get a lot of stuff off. I'm good friends with Neil Primmitt from 80s Casuals. I get a lot of stuff from there. I'm good friends with Ravi from Stewart's. I've shopped in Stewart's since I was 11 years old. All right, families have come, people have come and gone inside there, but I've shopped in that shop since we were, that's a lie, not 11, beg your pardon, probably 16. I've been shopping in there, 15, 16. Yeah, and I do a bit of shopping at the Modfather as well. So it's all that sort of look. I mean, many years ago, if you got caught out or caught anywhere, you probably get beat up if you were a skinhead and you saw a load of mods or you saw a load of it or whatever, all different sort of like little cliques. But I think now I don't dress casual, I don't dress skinhead, and I don't dress mod. I dress all three. I mix it up. Like I've got mod clothes, I've got skinhead clothes, and I've got casual clothes, if that's what you want to call them. I'm not saying I go out in knee-high DM boots because that'd be a lie. I only ever really wear trainers. I don't wear anything else other than trainers, really, apart from when I'm at work. But I normally just wear trainers. But yeah, I mean, I think skinhead, mod, and casual have all morphed now. It's like if you go to Scooter Rally or you go to, like last year, we went to Brighton for the day on the August bank holiday. And there's all walks of life there, but the majority of people are either skinhead, casual, or a mod. Do you know what I mean? Where 50 years ago, you got beat up if you look like that.
Absolutely. I remember watching Quadrophenia when I was a kid and seeing the fights between mods and rockers and that. You know, obviously we spoke about off camera. We're both like very, you know, passionate about spreading awareness of like mental health and things like. I've discussed with you. I've got autism, and it clicked a lot of things in my head and provided clarity why I do certain little weird things. But like, I also think I've got ADHD because the two go hand in hand. It's like everything's always rushing around my brain. I go out on my own and I'm, you know, fiercely independent. But basically, I'm surprised that I've, you know, not been run over so far because I could be walking down the street and wave to someone and then just step into the middle of the road. And I have got to be careful. And I know that that's obviously what you've spoken about in other interviews as well as having OCD. And I'm thinking, do you reckon that helps you sort of harness your style in terms of everything has to be perfect? I told you I'm the same about if a plug was left in or I've got a piece of tomato ketchup on my coat or whatever, which is a regular occurrence for me because I can't feed myself properly, which is one of the fears with the Tomlinson smoke, to be fair. But yeah, I'll let you carry on.
No, yeah, I've got OCD quite well. Now, everyone, there's millions of forms of OCD. It's not all the same. Some people wear gloves and they never go out. Some people have to have everything set into blah, blah, blah. Some people do routines. There's all sorts. I'm quite particular it drives my missus up the wall, right? You know, if I opened a Branston pickle and there's a little bit of butter in there, that's gone in the bin. Do you know what I mean? So, so there's all sorts of things like that. Now, my missus, not now, she's changed her job, but she used to work with people, children and that, with ADHD and that. And she's always said that I've got it. And I spoke to my doctor about it, and he said, look, I could put you through the tests. I told her a few things about it, and she said, it does look that way. But to get a proper test, it's 3 years, right?
Absolutely.
Now, do I need to know that I've got ADHD at 61? Because in 3 years' time, I'll be 61. If I've got on 61 years with it, another X amount, do you know what I mean? I am a little bit odd, I'm not going to say. And you can ask anyone who knows me, and in jest, they probably go, he's fucking mental, he is. Not in a nasty way.
Yeah,
you know
it's a positive way.
But it's I'm quite bizarre. I'm very particular. I'm very clean, and everything has to be done. And what does do my head in is I don't like change. So if I made arrangements to go out tonight, and whoever it was rang me and said I can't make it, that'd do me head in for a couple of hours, and then I'd get over it. But also as well, I've digressed a bit. I was going to say this earlier. Basically, what happened because I was born to older parents, my mum died when I was 13. So that devastated the life out of me. And I probably haven't really ever got over it, to be honest with you. And in that house where I lived there for 20 years. My dad eventually died when I was 24. There was a bit of a family feud going on, so I weren't actually talking to my dad when he died, so I'll never forget that. Also, as well, the other thing is I did see a counsellor because they put it down as a bereavement breakdown when I was about 31. So I did see a counsellor, and people say the counsellor sort you out. Do they? Or is it just because you're talking to someone who is shutting up and just listening to you? Do you know what I mean? I mean, if someone had loads of problems, you just sat there listening, they got it all off their chest. Is that them doing a job? Or is that you just getting off your chest? I don't know.
I get what you're saying.
Do you understand what I mean? So, yeah, I did see that. I am a mental health first aider now at work.
Brilliant.
I do get it because I've had certain. I'm not saying I'm going to kill myself or nothing like that. I don't mean that, but everyone's had dark experience in my life, and I in the late 90s was quite dark. I was on Prozac for a while, and for about 6 months, I was a bit of a bad way. I went through a messy divorce and blah, 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 but that's water under the bridge now. And then obviously got divorced. So at the time, you think that's the end, don't you? Do you know what I mean? But you sort of like get through it. But over the years, probably in the last 16 years, I've lost 11 mates to suicide.
Sorry,
yeah, I mean, some of them I knew really well. Some of them I knew to see about. But do you know what I mean? You still knew them. And the last but one, I was out for a meal with my kids at Christmas. And it was the day before Christmas Eve. Because all my children are older now. My youngest child's in their late 20s. Do you know what I mean? I've got 8 grandchildren. So they're all older now. And they're divorced. I'm divorced. They all live in London. I've got a new missus, which I've been with for 16 years, so it's all water under the bridge. However, every Christmas we all go out for a meal. Normally, because they've got children, so they want to spend it with them Christmas Day, so we try and get the nearest Saturday to Christmas. So I was out for a meal with a mate of mine. I can't remember if he rang me or texted me. And I thought, I can't answer it now. I'll do it tomorrow. Well, the next day was Christmas Eve. So I was busy doing bits and pieces. Then it was Christmas Day. Then I was around my sister's Boxing Day. And then I thought I'd give him a ring. Well, then I got a phone call that morning. He'd hanged himself. So even though I probably wasn't the last person he spoke to, I was probably one of them. Last person he tried to contact. You know what I mean? Now, you know, after you think, was he ringing to say goodbye? Was he ringing? I mean, I couldn't. If someone's going to do it, they're going to do it. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm I've done suicide awareness. But the way I see it, if someone's going to ring you and tell you they're going to commit suicide, that is more of a cry for help than it is.
I understand. Firstly, can
You
I
know
just
what I mean?
say thank you for sharing that, because
No problem, mate.
especially people, obviously, women do have mental health issues. I totally,
Yeah.
but us lads, I do, because I've always been able to be in touch with my emotions to the point where it's annoying. Even though I don't drink, I'm definitely the person who has a deep and meaningful who would be having a deep and meaningful conversation at 4 o'clock in the morning. In a kitchen, if I was still having house parties like I used to do when I was a bit younger. What do you call it? It's so important that we sort of spread awareness and speak about these things. Is it? And is that why you would say that you know, you, you almost have a focus through casual clothing? Because I know from the pictures that I've seen, you've got a bit of an Adidas man cave. Do you often seek a bit of sanctuary in there and just a few
Yeah, I
minutes out?
mean, to be honest with you, how that come about, Joe, what it was about, how long ago is it now? I've always been into clothing. Cut a long story short, when I left school, I tried engineering. I did that for about 7 years, and then it wasn't for me. But I was enjoying it, don't get me wrong, but it weren't, like you just feel like something's missing.
Yeah.
Well, I had a day off and I went up London. I was walking up London and I went into a shop called Cecil G in London. And while I was in there just looking through stuff, a couple come in, a man and a woman. And from what I can tell, the man had a suit altered and he was waiting to pick it up, right? And while he was there, the woman, I presume was his wife, said to him, "Oh, while you're here, why don't you get a shirt and tie?" So he went, "All right." And I was watching him because I couldn't be served because the man was serving them and he was picking up stuff. And I was thinking, fucking hell, mate, that tie don't go with that shirt. That shirt don't go with that suit. It was awful. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, oh, it's none of my business. So I was going to, in the end, I thought, he's going to look a right dickhead. So I picked up a shirt and I picked up a tie and I said, "Look, I don't mean to be rude." I said, "But you're better off with that." And his missus went, "Oh, that's lovely." He was like, he'd bought it. What I remember it clear as a bell. He'd bought a blue pinstripe suit and he's picking up like green polka dot shirts and stripy ties. And I thought, that's fucking horrible, mate. What are you doing? Going to ruin the suit. And the suit was, they used to sell Hugo Boss suits, which were probably about 500 or 600 quid. And this is late 80s. So that weren't to be sniffed at. Do you know what I mean? And so I give him a sky blue shirt and a gold tie. And of course, he couldn't thank me enough. Well, as they left, the man behind the counter said to me, "You in fashion?" I went, "No, I'm an engineer." I wasn't even an engineer. I was a machine setter at a packing factory, right? And he said, "Do you want a job?" So I got a job. He said, "No, seriously, do you want a job?" He said, "We're looking for someone in our Brent Cross branch who got an eye for flavour." And I went, "Don't know." I said, "It's not really me, mate. I'm not really into sales." He said, "Well, what have we got to lose?" And I said, "Look," he said, "Well, here's my number. If you change your mind, ring me." Well, on the way home, I walked all the way to Leicester Square and got on the tube. And when I got on the tube, I thought, I should have said, yeah, like you just think. And I think it's one of those things that if I hadn't have done it, I'd have regretted it. Don't get me wrong, I did do it. And after 6 months, I fucking hated it. I handed my notice and it worked. I loved going there with the clothing. But what I couldn't get my head around was working on a Saturday because I'd never worked on a Saturday before.
Yeah, man.
Oh, I couldn't do it. I couldn't go football. I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. And my mum had died because obviously I was probably, how old was I then? I was probably 22. So believe it or not, my dad was 62 and had never been to a doctor and never been to hospital, right? He was even born at home. So he'd never been in hospital. Well, then he used to smoke about 100 fags a day. So he got really, really bad chest infection, bronchitis and emphysema within about 3 weeks. And he just deteriorated from them for quite a few years. So eventually he was on oxygen indoors, all the rest of it. So I sort of had to look after him. So I felt really bad working. It weren't so much that, it was only 14 miles from my house. It weren't so much that, it was a bit of an arsehole to get there and get back. And also as well, you either did 10 till 6 or 12 till 8 over the 5 days over the 7. And I just the whole time I was there, I was thinking about him, thinking, is he all right? Is he not all right? Do you know what I mean? Well, anyway, cut a long story short, which isn't really for this podcast, but I ended up falling out of all my family over it, didn't speak them to years, and then eventually went into a home, and all hell broke loose. Do you know what I mean? But so I mean, I was really into the clothing side of it, and believe it or not, I had about 70 pair of shoes. I just love shoes. I'd go up the shop to buy milk and I'd come back with a pair of shoes. That's how I was obsessed with shoes. And then I've always, same as anyone I know, we've always been into clothing. I don't drink. I've never really drunk. And about, where are we now? Must have been in 2014, 10 years ago, I was going to work, bearing in mind I hadn't had a day off or late for 7 years, sick, right? Never been sick. Because touch wood, I don't do colds or get colds or anything like that. So I drove to work and I felt something weren't right. I just felt sweaty, horrible, terrible stomachache. But it weren't like a stomachache like you normally get. It felt like the whole of my inside was on fire. So I drove about 20 miles and then I run my missus and then so I'm coming home. And as I opened the door, I saw I collapsed. Went upstairs. She's going to ring ambulance. Wouldn't let her ring an ambulance. Blah, blah, blah. Eventually, she rung it against my will. Yeah, so to be fair, she saved my life. So it's always an argument winner because she saved my life. Do you know what I mean? So I went to hospital. Anyway, cut a long story short, went to hospital. Turns out that the pain I was experiencing, because my appendix had burst.
Yeah.
And all the gangrene in my appendix had melted my bowel.
Oh,
so I had to have bowel reconstruction. You wouldn't believe what I went through. I was off work 5 months. But up until that day, I'd probably smoked 40 fags a day, right? And I was in hospital. I had tubes coming out of every orifice you could imagine, right? I couldn't move. I was on my own morphine drip, my own morphine control, and when women have a baby, they have epidural, and they normally have epidural for 6 hours. I had it for 3 days. That's how bad. No. I was in a terrible state. But my main concern, I was thinking, I'm going to make it out of here. I'm going to make it out of here. And then that was 1 week. The following week, they told my missus and my daughter that I'd got appendix, and I'd be downstairs in the operating theatre probably for half an hour to go and get a coffee and come back. I was down there about 5 hours. They sent my missus home. Nearly died on the operating table. Nearly died a week later. So I was in a bit of a state. Do you know what I mean? But while I was convalescing, that was in the February 2014. A new line of Adidas come out called Spezial. Right, and that sort of got me. I'm not saying that got me into it. I stopped smoking, and I was thinking the money I was spending on cigarettes every week, I need something to show for it. So even though I had probably had about 30 pair of trainers, 40 pair of trainers, I wanted to do something I was really interested in. So I started collecting more trainers. So instead of buying cigarettes, I'd order a pair of trainers at the end of the month. Then after about 3 or 4 months, I've got 6, 7 pair of trainers. It sort of like stopped me from smoking, and I haven't smoked since. But through people I knew with this special launch, I probably could have gone to the first one, but I couldn't walk because I'd had this operation. But I've never missed, apart from one of the ones in Darwin, the CP one, because I was on holiday, I've gone to every single launch.
Good man.
Near enough every launch and probably every one at Carnaby Street. I've been to Manchester, Newcastle. There's going to be another one, as we spoke about the other day, in Darwin. So I will go up there. Been to Blackburn. I did do Manchester as well. So that's it was something to look forward to. Do you know what I mean? While I was convalescing, because I don't care what anyone says. If your brain's all right, but I couldn't move. There's nothing more worse. Which you probably know a bit about that. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, like especially when people don't talk to me, but instead talk to the people that I'm with, or say for example, I'm not necessarily bothered about being in a wheelchair one bit at all. Say for example, if I can't get into a building, or if there's not any accessible provisions at festivals, and that's why I've always felt equal to society. I've never been bullied or anything, which is good. And
That's
that,
what I
but
know.
one thing I've noticed about the Spezial community and casual community, people thought I were weird at school. Not weird in a bad way, but I was massively into eras that wasn't associated with a now 24-year-old man. So 10 years ago, I've always been into this for the last decade or so. Massively into the Stone Roses, and always been into Oasis, always been into house music. As you can see, there's a few signs on the wall and Stone Roses placard there and stuff. And feeling part of something, for me, I love it. I love the connections that I've made through this community. A lad who's also in a wheelchair like myself, called Stuart Mills, he's even been round to my house, and he lives in Birmingham. For me, that's what it's about, isn't it? It's not even
Yeah.
necessarily about the clothes and stuff. I regularly speak to Sam, and we don't even speak about Spezial. We speak about Tottenham and Burnley and how crap we're both doing. But that for me is what it's about, man. What would you say to anyone who why do you think the Spezial community is like so special, or the
Well, I think
casual clothing community?
I think what it is, I think it's the same as all the Adidas. Just because not even
Yeah,
normal Adidas launches, when something
absolutely. Yeah,
comes out, you go. I just think I don't know. I don't know. It's like there's a bit of camaraderie. Obviously, there's always banter and everything, but you seem to all come together. I mean, I went to one the other week at Carnaby Street. Well, um, the last special drop a few weeks ago, and everyone's there. Everyone's happy to see one another, and there's no arguments, and it's just, do you know what I mean? It's just a nice
absolutely.
feeling, and because I think what it is, everyone's like-minded. Everyone, I mean, I wouldn't go to a fishing convention because I've got no interest in fishing. Do you see what I mean? And I wouldn't go there and make out I'm interested in fishing. But so everyone who goes wants to be there. Do you know what I mean? And they've
Yeah,
all got the same interest. I mean, I don't care if you've got one pair of trainers or a million pair of trainers. If you like trainers, you like trainers. And for me, which I've said before on a podcast a few years ago, for me, I'm not just saying that because I like Adidas. I think if you're an 80-year-old bloke or a man and you got a pair of Air Force Ones on, I think, what's going on here?
okay, yeah.
But if you've got a pair of Gazelles on, I don't think anyone's taking notice. Do you know what I mean? It's like just the norm, you know?
Absolutely, totally agree. My mum wanted me to ask. I forgot at the time, but my mum wanted me to ask. I can't remember who it was as a guest, but one guest that I got. How much would it take to make you wear? How much money would it take for you to wear a pair of Skechers? And it's true, because there is only one trainer for me anyway, and that's
Yeah.
Adidas. I presume that's something you agree with, mate.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've got two pair of Nike, which are Nike Wimbledons. They're not the original pairs, but they're the sort of things you wore in the 80s because obviously once you started wearing your Pringles, and because that's another thing as well. I've proper digressed. I told you. I was vaccinated with a gramophone needle, mate. I can talk all night if I have to. Right. I think back in the day, I think Manchester and that, and Liverpool and all the rest of it. Yeah, Liverpool went to Europe, and Liverpool bought all the trainers back from Wade. I totally get it, and Wade Smith did all that. I totally understand that, and yes, they're correct. But I think the London lot, I think we're more the Pringle, the Lionel Scott, the golf look. That's what I think, and the tennis look. That's with your Fila and your Ticini and your Cabici and that. But I forgot to say now. Proper digressed. But yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I had Nike Wimbledons back in the day, but the first pair of trainers I bought with my own money was a pair of light green Gazelles. and that was when I was 17, and that probably probably been 16 or 17. And the last drop that Gary did back in November, he brought out the Green Gazelles, didn't he?
Yeah.
So they were a must-have for me. They were the favourite out of all of them of that drop, to be fair, because they was a bit of nostalgia, you know. But it's good though, because obviously, as you say about the camaraderie and all coming together. I get invited everywhere. It's great. I mean, not only me, there's loads of people do. You know, you see the same faces. I mean, there's never no trouble or bother, you know. It's everyone's. I'm quite lucky that I do get invited to places, and it's bizarre that when you're out, you have your picture done with people and they have their picture done with you, and it's all because you like Adidas, you know.
Absolutely.
It is, which is good. It's all good. You know what I mean? And I've been involved in certain things. There's something coming out on the 5th of May. No, sorry, the 3rd of May. There's a few of us that went to Scotland to be involved in a video for a couple called Chris and Reese, a father and son, and they're bringing out a song called Stone Island. And there was myself, Bez, Brian McClare, who used to play for Man United.
Yeah, I know him.
Gal Porter, Mikey from a group called Smooth and Terrell. And we all went up there and did this video. I won't tell you what the video's about because I don't want to spoil it. But that's dropping in on the 3rd of May. And that will be on all formats. Obviously, I will share it. Everyone who was involved in the video will share it. I think Mr. Shifters are getting copies and Rough Trade are getting copies. So that's all happening. So I'll get invited to that. I was asked to be, I was an extra in a film, the new Danny Dyer film coming out called Marching Powder. Yeah, I was an extra in that for a couple of days, just with people. I mean, to be honest with you, it was my mate Neil Primmett from 80s Casuals. He put me on someone. Yeah. I think you should. He's got some stories because a lot of people just think Neil is clothes. He's been music. He used to do music. He used to be a promoter. He's done Oasis. He's done all of them. But that's his. I'm not going to take the jam out of his donut. I'll let you I'll let him tell you that. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, smashing bloke. There's something going on in Derby on the 5th of May. I think it might even be bank holiday weekend that weekend. So he's got a store in Derby, so everyone's going to go down there. So yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be invited everywhere and do bits and pieces. I don't know when that film's coming out. I'm only an extra in it for a couple of days. All day filming. I'll be lucky if I'm in it 15 seconds. You know what I mean?
I'd start laughing. I'd start laughing as soon as I've got nervous laughter. So whenever anything serious happens, I've done well on this podcast episode. A nervous reaction, I can never deal with anything serious. So as soon as they press action, I'd start laughing, me. But you've done well to be in that film there, mate. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, but I'm no co-star. I'm no Danny Dyer. I'm just literally probably in the background. You might see me whiz past being chased by someone or something. Do you know what I mean?
Headbutting someone like Ian Brown did in This Is England with Truncheon when he was a police officer. But yeah, proper love this conversation, mate. And thank you so much for coming on, man. And like I say, I really feel part of this move. It's not move, part of the scene. And like I say, it's good, and it's good that everyone comes together. And yeah, just thanks for coming on. I've got one final question, a bit of a quirky one I was thinking of yesterday. If you could sit around the table and have a pint or a bit of grub with anyone from the world of football, music, and fashion, like all three of them together, who would it be? No worries if you don't know.
Well, one person or?
Yeah, we'll go with one or two. Three might be.
I'd love to go out with Liam Gallagher.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough because I'm friends with fellas. I was lucky enough to go on Soccer AM quite a few times, and I stayed and meet everyone who was on there. I've done it for weeks, and it was brilliant. So fair play to him for letting me do that. And I got to meet Noel. I got to meet Noel Gallagher, so that was quite a bit weird, but really good. I've met Ian Brown as well. I haven't met the two people I would like to meet would be Richard Ashcroft and Liam Gallagher. But I would love, even though I don't drink, I would just sit there and just listen to Liam Gallagher, because I think if he wasn't a singer, I think he could be a comedian, because just what he says, it just cracks me up. Do you know what I mean? my sense of humour.
Totally agree. I think I'd be the same with Ian Brown, Liam Gallagher. Even though obviously this man's not here anymore, I think you're a bit of a mad bastard, and I don't necessarily agree with what he did against England. But I'd love to sit around the table with Liam Gallagher, Ian Brown, Diego Maradona, Paul Gascoigne, and Tyson Fury, because they all remind me a little bit myself. Even though I don't do any of that hell-raising activities as much as I'd like to in the other life, my brain's already as much as damaged as it is. But we won't go into that one too much. But Dal, thank you very much for coming on,
No
man.
problem, mate. No problem. Thank you. No problem. And, thank you very much, Joe. And I'll speak to you soon, mate. Keep an eye on the video.
Have you got any parting words before we stop recording and speak to you after I stop recording?
Also, thank you very much, mate. I think you're an inspiration. Fair play to you, mate. I mean, most people would have crumbled, but fair play to you, mate. And hopefully we will meet when we go to where are we going? Darwin? Is it Darwin?
Darwin, but I better not wear my Burnley FC top or anything like that in Darwin.
I better not turn up in Brentford one. I upset everyone the other week because I said it was Blackburn. They got a right hump.
Good man. I'll speak to you in a second, pal, when we press stop. Cheers.
Cheers, pal.